Welcome back to Channel. Today, we explore a question few dare ask. How is China expanding its influence across the world without firing a shot? In this video, China's silent conquest, how Beijing is winning without war, will unpack Beijing's arsenal of economic, political, and strategic tools that reshape the global order quietly, steadily, subtly. You might think superpowers win wars with bombs and tanks, but in the 21st century, conquest often looks very different. It looks like loans, infrastructure, influence, and silent pressure. Stay with me, and by the end, you'll see how this silent conquest is unfolding and what the world can do to respond. Foundations, ideology, and strategy. To understand today's strategy, we need to go back. China's modern foreign policy is shaped by key ideas. Taoguang Yanghui, meaning hide your strength, bide your time. This dictum, popularized in the Reform era, urged China to quietly build power while avoiding direct confrontation. The shift from peaceful rise to more assertive diplomacy. Over time, Beijing has grown more confident in its global posture. Salami slicing, a tactic where China advances its interests in small increments, too small to provoke a major backlash on their own, but cumulatively significant. These strategic foundations feed into a modern approach, one where China can expand influence without open war. Next, we'll see how Beijing wields the tools of debt, trade, and infrastructure as instruments of power. Economic tools, debt, trade, and infrastructure. Beijing's most visible tool is economic statecraft, creating dependencies through trade, infrastructure, and debt. A. Belt and Road Initiative, BRI. Launched in 2013, the BRI connects dozens of countries via rail, roads, energy, ports, and digital infrastructure. It aims not only to open trade routes, but also to bring markets, finance, and policies closer to China's orbit. According to the World Bank, BRI projects in many sectors cumulatively account for hundreds of billions in commitments. B. Debt diplomacy, or debt trap fears. Many analysts accuse China of debt diplomacy, offering large loans to developing countries which then struggle to repay. Critics claim China uses default as leverage to seize strategic assets. A notable example, Sri Lanka's Hambantota port was leased to Chinese firms for 99 years when Sri Lanka couldn't service the loans. HON Diplomat. China also invests in power plants, mining, infrastructure in resource-rich countries, hedging loans with control over supply chains. C. Port takeovers and logistics control. China has quietly accumulated stakes in global ports. Control over logistics enables influence over trade routes and supply chains. Modern diplomacy. In Latin America, China has made major investments in ports in Peru, Panama, etc. Control over ports can also provide intelligence, strategic access, and influence over shipping norms. D. Trade, market access, and industry policy. China pushes for favorable trade deals, preferential access for its SOEs, state-owned enterprises, and export of industrial capacity. By binding countries into supply chains, they tie their economies to Chinese demand and policy preferences. Countries participating in BRI are often urged or pressured to align regulations, standards, and procurement to Chinese norms. Political and influence tools. Economic leverage is powerful, but Beijing complements it with a web of political influence and soft power. A. United Front and overseas influence networks. The United Front Work Department, UFWD, is a core CCP organ devoted to political influence tactics, engaging with overseas Chinese communities, media, diaspora, business, academics. One recent development, China distributing identity cards to Taiwanese citizens in China to integrate them legally and politically, extending jurisdiction and influence. St. Antony's International Review. In target countries, Chinese-funded associations, cultural institutes, Chinese diaspora organizations help build goodwill, often serving as gatekeepers or influence conduits. Media, narratives, and information control. Chinese state media, CGTN and Xinhua, produce global content, often soft-selling Chinese perspectives. Use of digital infrastructure, 5G telecommunications, allows China to embed its standards and even influence information flows and censorship norms abroad. Selective leaks, rumors, and narrative framing are all parts of a cognitive warfare approach. Global Taiwan Institute. Diplomacy, multilateral forums, and institutional capture. China pushes to place its cadres in international institutions, UN, World Health Organization, FAO, to shift norms and agendas. Through diplomacy, China offers aid, incentives, or pressure for countries to support its positions, including issues like the One China policy and votes in the UN. Countries that depend heavily on Chinese trade or investment often find it politically risky to oppose Beijing on issues like human rights, Taiwan, South China Sea, etc. D. Political coercion and leverage. When countries stray, China may threaten to cut trade, cancel loan disbursements, or withdraw investment. Domestic elites or media in weaker states may be co-opted, pressured, or incentivized through perks, favors to support pro-China stances. Military and security silent tactics. While China rarely engages in full-scale war, its military toolkit includes silent tactics, subtle pressure, gray zone operations, psychological warfare, and strategic ambiguity. A. Gray zone or maritime coercion. China uses maritime militia, coast guard, fishing fleets to assert claims in disputed waters, e.g., South China Sea, without crossing the threshold of war. Each incremental move, building reefs, putting up installations, is part of salami slicing. Harassment, blockades, and encirclement in disputed zones are frequent, designed to wear down resistance. B. Cognitive warfare and silent exercises. China increasingly uses silent exercises, unannounced drills, delayed or partial public disclosures to keep targets off balance. Global Taiwan Institute. Selective leaks, rumors, and ambiguity sow confusion and fear, making adversaries hesitate or miscalculate. These tactics aim to degrade political will, not just military capacity. C. Surveillance, cyber, and intelligence. China is heavily investing in satellites, space-based assets, signal intelligence, and cyber capability to monitor and, when needed, disrupt. Dual-use infrastructure, e.g. ports and telecom, can also serve strategic or intelligence purposes. D. Strategic ambiguity and denial. Beijing often denies direct involvement or maintains plausible deniability for coercive acts, making retaliation riskier. Such ambiguity adds to the psychological pressure on smaller states. Case studies and regional impacts. Let's see how China's silent conquest plays out across regions. Concrete examples that reveal the costs, resistance, and complexity. A. Sri Lanka Hambantota Port. Sri Lanka's inability to service Chinese debt led to the 99-year lease of Hambantota Port to Chinese firms. This move gave Beijing control of key maritime infrastructure in the Indian Ocean. It's often cited as a flagship example of debt diplomacy and strategic asset transfer. B. Pakistan, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC. In Pakistan, China's building highways, power plants, Gwadir Port, pipelines. CPEC exemplifies how Beijing integrates infrastructure, energy, and logistics to bind a country's economy to China. Pakistan's dependence on Chinese investment gives Beijing significant leverage over policies and alignment. C. Africa. Across Africa, China builds railways, ports, mining infrastructure, and provides loans. In many cases, contracts bypass transparency and local oversight, raising concerns about sovereignty. Many states face difficulty repaying debt, which can lead to renegotiation or increased Chinese influence. D. Latin America and the Americas. China's expansion into Latin America, including ports in Peru, Panama, and influence over logistics, has raised alarms in U.S. strategic circles. Modern diplomacy. By integrating trade and infrastructure networks, China extends its reach into the Western Hemisphere. E. Taiwan and United Front on islands. China's United Front and identity card distribution tactics in Taiwan reflect a non-military pressure campaign to integrate Taiwanese frameworks. St. Antony's International Review. On disputed islands, China often uses civilian or quasi-civilian actors, tourists, fishers, research vessels, to assert presence without triggering war. These case studies show that the silent conquest is not just theory, it's aggressively underway, with real consequences for sovereignty, autonomy, and strategic balance.
Risks, global responses, and countermeasures. China's strategy is potent, but it carries risks, and the world is waking up to it. Let's examine vulnerabilities and how states can respond. A. Risks and vulnerabilities. Debt burden and backlash. Excessive debt may lead to default or forced concessions, but public backlash in debtor nations may undermine projects. Transparency and corruption concerns. Many agreements are opaque, which fuels local resentment and political risk. Geopolitical backlash. Stronger states may push back, impose constraints, or offer alternatives. Overreach and overdependence. China risks stretching itself too thin or creating dependencies that backfire. B. Global responses and countermeasures. Coalitions and alliances. US, EU, Japan, India, and others are coordinating to offer alternative infrastructure financing, strategic frameworks, and defense pacts. Standards and norms. Promoting transparency, environmental standards, debt audits, open procurement. Local capacity building and vigilance. Empowering civil society, journalism, legal checks to scrutinize agreements. Diversified partnerships. Debtor states can avoid over-reliance on a single partner by engaging multiple investors. Strategic hedges. Regional powers may strengthen naval and security capabilities to deter coercion. C. The choice ahead. Countries must decide, accept short-term gains from Chinese investment and risk dependence, or resist and risk lost development opportunities. The global balance will depend on whether democracies and like-minded states can offer compelling alternatives. Conclusion and call to action. Beijing's conquest is silent but effective. Through economics, influence, and ambiguity, China is reshaping global power dynamics without conventional war. But silent conquest is not irreversible. With awareness, coordination, and principled alternatives, states and societies can reclaim agency. If you found this useful, hit like, subscribe, and share this video. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Which region do you think is most at risk? How should the world respond? Until next time, stay informed, stay vigilant.